Have you ever stopped to think about how life tests us in ways we don't always understand? Sometimes the test comes in the form of an unexpected person, a glance that carries an ancient pain, or a word that reminds us of everything we were and everything we no longer want to be. Today, I want you to pause for a minute. Take a deep breath and tell me, who would you be if the whole world told you that you're not capable? Would you believe them? Or would you have the courage to prove that God still writes miracles in simple lives? Comment below what you would do if you were challenged to fix something no one else could. I want to hear your story. The conference hall of Sterling Motors, a space where cold marble blended with the dull gleam of spotlights, flickered like an arena of judgment. There, among white-coated engineers, mechanics proud of their badges, and journalists hungry for headlines, stood the figure of Eleanor Mitchell. Her hair was tied up in a makeshift bun, with a few stubborn strands escaping like rebels in the crowd. Her face, marked by nights of worry and days of invisible struggles, seemed oblivious to the refinement of the setting. She wore only a simple white shirt, jeans that had seen better days, and worn-out shoes, almost an affront to the formality overflowing from the designer suits. In the farthest corner of the hall, leaning against an aged leather armchair, was Margaret, the widow of one of Sterling's largest shareholders. She wore a black scarf that wrapped around her grey hair, and her half-closed eyes seemed to study every detail of the woman who dared to defy the relentless logic of gears and bolts. Margaret was not just an elderly widow, she was the guardian of traditions that upheld the company, like a closed empire for ordinary people. Her gaze was a sharpened blade, ready to cut anyone who dared to contradict her. Richard Sterling, the company's CEO, raised the microphone with the theatricality of a courtroom judge. His voice echoed like a verdict. This woman thinks she can fix the R7000 engine, the most sophisticated in our fleet, which our best engineers couldn't repair in 3 whole days. Without a degree, without a technical background, just dreams and illusions. I challenge her, here, in front of everyone. Fix what my elite team couldn't, and prove you deserve to be among us. Otherwise, leave this place forever. He tossed a wrench at Eleanor's feet. The metallic sound, almost like thunder, shattered the silence. Eleanor bent down, picked up the wrench with trembling hands, and for a second, the world stopped. In that moment, the past came rushing back like a gale. She saw herself as a girl in a workshop in a forgotten small town. Her father, a humble mechanic, had taught her to listen to the sighs of engines as if they were a song. "Every piece has a story, daughter," he would say in his hoarse voice, "and those who respect the story fix the heart of the problem." But life, relentless as always, had taken her father too soon, leaving behind debts and an empty workshop. She closed her eyes, remembering her father's calloused hands, the afternoons spent helping him dismantle old carburetors while he spoke of God and the dignity no one could steal. That's how she learned to value what others called junk, to hear the sound of gears as if understanding the language of the soul. The clank of the wrench on the floor was like a call to everything she had been before and everything she could still become. When she opened her eyes, the audience seemed like a wall of judgment. Margaret, from the back of the hall, raised an eyebrow, as if savoring the start of a spectacle she herself had scripted. But within Eleanor's heart, something burned stronger than fear. The flame of faith her father had left her as an inheritance. She took a deep breath, raised her gaze to Richard, and said with a steady voice, "I accept the challenge. Not for you, not for them, but for me, because I know where I come from. And I know that God doesn't make mistakes in choosing who he calls to great battles." The R7000 engine, a mechanical beast of the latest generation, waited like a sleeping monster. Its gears gleamed under the harsh lights, like teeth ready to devour dreams. Eleanor walked toward it, each step heavy as a sentence. The engineers watched her with expressions of disdain, exchanging muffled laughs and venomous whispers. "She's going to fail," one of them said. "She doesn't even have a degree." But Eleanor didn't hear them. Within her, the sound of the engine was an ancient melody, like her father's whispered prayer. She remembered when he held her hand on a rainy day and said, "Daughter, the world will try to break you, but never forget. You are stronger than any bolt. God made you to be a light where others see only darkness." With calloused hands, she touched the engine's metal casing, feeling the heat emanating from within like a weary heart. She took a deep breath and began to work. Each movement was like a dance of redemption. Sweat dripped down her forehead, mingling with the tears that insisted on falling. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Because within her was more than technique. There was purpose, there was history, there was a promise made to a father who dreamed of his daughter conquering the impossible. Margaret watched in silence, her eyes moist with memories no one there could understand. Within her something trembled, a forgotten memory of when she still believed simple people could work miracles. But time had hardened her heart like steel, and now she watched like a stern judge, waiting for the right moment to crush any remnant of hope. As the clock ticked each second like a hammer of judgment, Eleanor found a minuscule flaw in the central gear, something the elite engineers had overlooked, a detail so small it could have been ignored, but for her, it was the thread of redemption. She tightened the bolt with care, as if sealing a prayer, and heard the soft click that seemed to whisper, "I'm still here." She raised her face, sweaty, exhausted, but with a steady gaze. The engine began to hum, first like a sigh, then like a song of life. And when its powerful roar echoed through the hall, the silence was shattered by restrained applause and astonished looks. Margaret, pale as the moon, brought her hand to her mouth and took a deep breath. Eleanor smiled, not out of arrogance, but because she knew in that moment she wasn't just a simple woman. She was living proof that God works miracles where the world sees impossibilities. The hall reverberated like an improvised confessional, where each glance seemed to hold unspoken secrets. Eleanor stood before the still-pulsing engine, her hands stained with grease and tears, her chest heaving with relief and exhaustion. Around her, the engineers and executives, once confident in their shining degrees and flawless spreadsheets, stared at her as if witnessing a miracle that defied all logic. Some whispered, others remained silent, as if something sacred had been profaned by the simplicity of this woman who dared to triumph where their theories had failed. In the back of the hall, Margaret seemed frozen in time, her black scarf now slipping, revealing grey hair disheveled by the wind of memories blowing fiercely in her heart. Her eyes, once hard as stone, shimmered with an emotion she couldn't name. The past struck her like a crashing wave. She remembered her husband, the stern man who had built Sterling Motors from nothing, and who, in his final days, had confided something she never had the courage to share. "Margaret, one day someone will come here without a degree, without pedigree, and will teach us that faith is greater than logic. On that day, Sterling will be reborn." His words now echoed in her mind like thunder. Had Eleanor been sent by God to fulfill that silent prophecy? Eleanor, unaware of the turmoil in the widow's heart, simply took a deep breath and allowed herself to savor the victory. But at the same time, a pang of pain cut through her soul. Why did she have to prove so much to be accepted? Why is the world so cruel to those who dare to rise from below? As her oil-stained hands trembled, she thought of her father, the modest workshop, the unpaid bills, the sound of the old Opala's engine she fixed the day before his death. "Daughter, whenever the world challenges you, remember who you are. You are my daughter, and my daughter was born to win." The whisper of that memory let the tears flow freely, like a baptism of courage. Richard Sterling, who until then had watched everything with the cynicism of a bored executive, cleared his throat, as if needing to regain control of the situation. He approached Eleanor, extended his hand still stained with vanity, and said in a dry tone, "Congratulations, Miss Mitchell. You did what none of my elite engineers could, but this changes nothing. Here, a degree still matters more than talent." The applause, which had started timidly, dissolved like smoke at that statement. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Eleanor gripped the wrench as if it were an improvised scepter. Her gaze burned with indignation, but also with compassion. She knew that behind Richard's words was fear, fear of losing his throne, fear of admitting that the strength of the soul is greater than any degree. She took a deep breath and, with a steady voice, spoke not only to him but to every soul watching, including those who, in life, carry their own invisible chains. "You can have all the degrees in the world, Richard, but you can't buy faith, courage, or the dignity of someone who's never had anything but their hands and God's blessing. I didn't come here to defeat you. I came to remind you that the impossible only exists for those who are afraid to try." A collective sigh rose from the hall like an unplanned prayer. Margaret brought her hand to her chest, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, the spark of hope. For a moment, she saw herself reflected in Eleanor's eyes, young, full of dreams and the will to change the world. And then, as if tearing the veil of her own soul, she rose from the armchair with difficulty. and with a trembling voice said, "Richard, you're wrong. This woman didn't just fix the engine. She fixed the heart of Sterling Motors. Today I understand that it's not the degree that makes the miracle. It's the faith of those who believe in the impossible." The hall trembled. The widow's words hung in the air like an ancient song. Some engineers, once haughty, lowered their heads. Others, in silence, closed their eyes, as if finally understanding that something greater than a machine was at play here, the redemption of an entire history of arrogance. Eleanor felt the weight of the moment, as if each breath were a living prayer. Her tear-filled eyes fixed on Margaret, and in a moment of complicity, the two women, the widow and the mechanic, realized that destiny isn't written with degrees or titles, but with the courage to say yes when everyone else says no. In a flash of gratitude, Eleanor whispered, "Thank you for believing, even if you didn't want to." But the silence was broken by a cry of indignation. Richard, pale as a statue, raised his hand in protest. "This is absurd. This woman had no authorization to touch the engine. She violated protocols, safety rules. I'll fire everyone who applauded this farce." His rage dripped like venom from his words, and his eyes, red with arrogance, scanned the hall for support. But he found only tense faces, averted gazes, and wavering hearts. Then Eleanor raised the wrench, holding it like a banner of faith. In a solemn tone echoing her father's teachings, she looked at each person, at all the humiliated and offended that life pushes to the margins, and said, "You can try to silence me, Richard, but you can't silence the truth. I didn't just fix an engine. I fixed a promise made to every simple person who ever believed they could be more. God brought me here to remind you that no one can steal the destiny of those who have the courage to fight. And if you want to expel me, do it. But you won't erase what I did here today." Her words pierced the air like arrows, striking the hearts of those present. Some executives, once indifferent, now exchanged looks of admiration. A young engineer, who until then had remained silent, approached Eleanor and said with a trembling voice, "I've never seen anything like this. Thank you for reminding us who we are." Margaret, her eyes brimming with tears, approached, gripped Eleanor's hand firmly and declared before everyone, "Sterling Motors is made of steel but also of hearts. Today, I choose to stand on the side of the heart. You are part of this company now, and I guarantee no one will take that from you." The silence turned to applause, an applause that wasn't just for Eleanor, but for every simple person who carries faith as their engine and dignity as their fuel. In that hall, something changed forever. It wasn't just a company being reborn. It was a flame reigniting in the hearts of all, reminding them that dignity is greater than vengeance, and forgiveness is stronger than pride. The sound of the engine Eleanor had fixed still echoed in the corners of the hall, like a song of victory resonating through each cold marble wall. But within each heart, something deeper and quieter arose, the spark of hope. Margaret, the elderly widow who for so long had been a symbol of institutional rigidity, was now the face of change. She looked at Eleanor as one looks at a living flame, feeling the weight of years, mistakes, and injustices she had allowed to happen in the name of empty glory. Within her, old memories surfaced like ghosts, her husband on his deathbed, saying that one day Sterling would need someone without medals to show what dignity was, the young Margaret believing that kindness was stronger than profit, the moment when, over time, all that was lost amidst contracts and dollars. She took a deep breath and with a trembling voice raised her hand, as if sealing an invisible pact with God and man. "I'm ashamed of having forgotten where I came from. This company was built by calloused hands, humble dreams, and people who believed the impossible could be overcome with courage. Today, I see that flame lit again. Thanks to you, Eleanor. May God give me strength to honor this." Her words cut through the hall like the song of a prophecy, and no one dared interrupt the moment. Richard, his face tense and fists clenched, looked from side to side, seeking support where there was none left. His arrogance crumbled before the undeniable truth that a degree is nothing without courage, and a badge is empty without a soul behind it. Within him, an old voice, perhaps that of the stern father who always demanded perfection, whispered vengefully, "Show them who's in charge. Show them you don't bow." But in that moment, Richard realized something that paralyzed him. The engine hadn't just been fixed. Something within him had been fixed too. The faith he didn't know he still had pulsed like a frightened child begging to be reborn. Eleanor approached Margaret and embraced her with the gentleness of someone who understands the pain scars carry. The widow's eyes closed, and a brief sob escaped her lips. A quick flashback crossed Margaret's mind. A summer afternoon when she, still young, learned to fix her first carburetor with her husband. He held her hands gently, saying, "You can be anything you want to be, my dear. Never doubt yourself." But time and disillusionment had extinguished that fire. Until today, Eleanor, her hands still stained with grease, raised her gaze to everyone and spoke with the firmness of someone carrying the weight of a lifetime. "I didn't come here to take anyone's place. I came to remind you that each of us has a story, and that our faith, however small, can move mountains. If I'm here, it's because someone long ago believed in me when no one else did. Today I want each of you to find that spark within yourselves, because as long as there's faith, there's no impossible." Her words became living prayers in the hearts of everyone there. A tear rolled down the face of a young intern who until then had been afraid to speak up. He raised his hand and with a trembling voice said, "I believe in you, Eleanor. Thank you for reminding us we're more than machines and spreadsheets." One by one, anonymous faces rose to confirm, yes, there was still life in that place. There were still souls. Richard finally took a deep breath, and in a fraction of a second his pride gave way. The mask fell. He approached Eleanor, his eyes red, and said in an almost boyish tone, "I didn't know who I was anymore until I saw you fix that engine. Thank you for reminding me." Those words didn't erase the mistakes, but they were a first step towards something new. Eleanor shook his hand firmly and said, "Life is made of new beginnings, Richard, and we all have a right to one." Margaret looked upward, as if seeking strength from the heavens, and whispered, "My God, may this company never forget where it came from. May pride give way to humility, and may degrees give way to dignity." And in a gesture of surrender, she removed the black scarf from her head, letting her grey hair dance in the wind of change. She seemed like a different woman, lighter, more human, as if she had finally found herself. The applause that rose then wasn't just for Eleanor, it was for everyone who ever felt small before a giant. It was for every father who taught his daughter to fix engines while speaking of God. It was for every woman who dared to say yes when the whole world shouted no. It was for every tear that fell in silence and was wiped away by calloused hands of faith. In the back of the hall, the R7000 engine hummed softly, as if approving the miracle. Eleanor knew that sound was more than metal working. It was the living testimony that dignity is greater than vengeance, that love is greater than arrogance, and that true strength lies not in degrees but in hearts that refuse to give up. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and let the silence become a prayer. Then she raised her face and spoke, as if delivering a prophecy. "May each of you go home today remembering that God doesn't choose the strongest. He chooses the willing. And if you have the courage to believe, there will be no engine impossible to fix, no injustice that can defeat you, because God still works miracles, and He works them in simple people like me, like you, like everyone here." A final collective sigh rose, as if every soul present said Amen. And so Eleanor, the simple woman in a white shirt, left the hall not as a victor, but as a messenger of faith. Because in the end, the true miracle wasn't the fixed engine. It was the restored dignity, the humbled pride, and the faith reborn in every heart.